Stoveleg Media, igniting conversation.
This is True Crime Cast. I am Jamie here with John in, our second or third attempt at this. We've been doing this for a long time, and it's rare that we have to redo the opening, but I hope that's not an omen.
Yeah, I mean, I feel good. Hopefully we can pull it together and crank one out here.
Yeah, to be clear, the entire issue was me. So we're having a good time. We're glad you're here with us for a case that has been requested many times and honestly been kind of putting it off because, as our writer MacKenzie noted when she sent over the outline, this is where Jamie's going to be looking at his phone a lot due to lots of violence in this one, particularly with children are involved. So there's your warning.
Yeah, this is brutal to say the least. So I expect you to be on your phone quite a bit. I put my phone down. I'm going to try to hang in there.
I got it charged and ready to go, but I will be locked in, just distracting myself from a little of the violence. Guys, we appreciate you listening. And as we're wrapping up this year, if you would like to get us a Christmas gift, the best thing you can get us is a big 5-star review.
Oh, I could think of a few things that, a Jeep Wrangler would be nice, but a 5-star review is second best.
That would be a great start.
Yeah.
We'll start there and work our way up.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
All right, John, let's just jump right into this one. I know you're excited. So why don't you get us rolling?
We're going to head down to the land down under. That is all
Tennessee. Oh, okay.
No, but I feel like if Tennessee had a cousin, it's Australians, right?
Gotta be.
Has to be. So Karen MacKenzie was a 31-year-old single mother in a very small town in Western Australia called Greenough. Karen did not have the happiest of childhoods growing up. She got involved with recreational drugs as a teenager. Now, from my understanding, Karen wasn't an addict, but did drugs as a form of stress relief, recreational type, like would go out to a party and use drugs, but was not like physically and chemically dependent on it. She ended up pregnant at the young age of 15. Karen gave birth to her son, Daniel, and did her very best to try to give him a good life, but she simply was not able to be a young mother and raise a young son. So she ended up giving Daniel to the care of her mother. Her name was Barbara Marchant.
Yeah, and that's got to be a tough decision. And I know you work in the foster care and adoption world, and I don't know, sometimes you see people that need to make that decision or mature enough to do so, and unfortunately, at least here in America, the state will make that decision for some people. Karen was described by her friends and family as friendly. She got along with folks. She was always willing to lend a hand. Barbara said of her daughter that she was full of life, always laughing, and loved all things music and all things nature. When she was 24 years old, she met a man named Andrew Allen. They were seemingly happy together. They ended up having 2 daughters, Amara and Katrina. And Karen was a devoted mom, but her relationship with Andrew was not working out. By 1993, Karen had moved to a small home in Greenough just outside of Geraldton. She was settling into the modest home with her daughters when her 16-year-old son, Daniel, decided that he wanted to come live with his mom. And of course, we weren't there. We don't know all the circumstances, but being close to your kids, I think generally is it's a warm and fuzzy feeling.
Yeah, of course. And I think that just because Daniel went to live with his grandmother didn't mean that he lost all connection with his mother.
Right.
I think they had a relationship, and then when he was older, he wanted to make that move. And by all accounts, Karen was excited to have her son back at home. They were going to be able to celebrate Christmas together as a family and just kind of have all of their family unit together under one roof. It was a special time. And she wanted him to have the opportunity to be a real big brother to her daughters. Amara attended the local primary school and was described as a very loving child. Now, Daniel was a bit of a rebel who did not care for school, But when he moved in with his mother, he was quick to enroll in high school. The extended family was hopeful that this move would be a fresh start for everyone.
Karen was first and foremost a mom. That's the role that she clung to the most. But she was known to have friends that still dabbled in the world of drug use and abuse. At the start of 1993, she had ended a serious relationship and was back on the dating scene. On the evening of February the 19th of 1993, Karen went to a party in nearby Geraldton, leaving Daniel at home to take care of the girls. She spends the night out with friends, she's drinking, and again, some recreational drug use took place, though there's no indication that she was the one partaking in the drug use. She stayed out at the party until around 5 a.m. when her friend William Mitchell offered to give her a ride home.
So William leaves Karen's house around 11 a.m. Sunday morning, February the 20th, and the day goes like normal. The night around 3 a.m. on what technically was Monday, February the 21st, 1993, their house is quiet. Everyone is sleeping except for Daniel, and he heard the sound of a car coming up the drive, and he went to see who it was. I mean, even though that Karen was out till 5 a.m. partying sometimes, I don't think it's too normal for cars at 3 a.m. to be pulling up your driveway, especially if everyone is asleep.
I wouldn't think so.
No one is expecting someone to be there. So he turned the kitchen light on and walked outside, and he saw a man approaching. According to what we know now, he attempted to greet the man, not realizing that the man was carrying a tomahawk. If you're not familiar with a tomahawk, think about an axe that you would split wood with, and now kind of shrink it down to half its size. It's a single-handed weapon.
I would say like a hatchet.
Yeah. Hatchet, tomahawk, same thing, basically. But this man was carrying one of those. This was brutal. 16-year-old Daniel was brutally murdered in his own front lawn by this man.
And again, this is him just going, put yourself in Daniel's shoes here of hearing something outside in the middle of the night. You go to check it out, and it's dark, and before you know it, somebody's tackling you and attacking you with a brutal weapon. It's horrifying. The man ended up, after he killed Daniel, going into the house where he found Karen asleep on a mattress in the living room. He immediately started assaulting her with the tomahawk, and she started having spasms. Obviously, she was asleep when this started. He continued to hit Karen with the axe until she was no longer moving, and it's believed that she died at that moment. She was just 31 years old at the time of her murder. After she was dead, this assailant with the tomahawk goes to her bedroom and starts ripping through the drawers as if he's looking for something. He finds a bottle of lotion and brings it back out to Karen's lifeless body. He covered her head with a bloody blanket and used the lotion to sexually assault, and I'll use the word violently rape, her corpse. Upstairs, in different bedrooms, 7-year-old Amara and 5-year-old Katrina were asleep as well, and they were also killed with this tomahawk. Evidence shows the girls were likely killed quickly, but also that Amara was sexually assaulted as well. So this guy obviously had horrible intentions and did the worst of the worst to everybody in that house.
Remind me, Jamie, to talk about the girls in particular. I don't want to give anything away right now, but I do want to bring them back up. So as the sun rose in the morning, there was a couple who was driving to Karen's home to meet her and visit, and they were just friends coming to help with some home projects. But when they drove up the driveway, they saw Daniel laying on the ground. Remember, he went outside and met his demise at the hands of the attacker outside. So at first they thought Daniel was just joking around, that he was laying on the ground, trying to pull a prank on him. But Daniel didn't move at all. And the man got out of the car, got closer, and he could barely recognize Daniel because there was blood all over him and he was brutally beaten. At the back door, they could hear the family dog was barking like crazy. So this freaked them out. They had no idea if this had just happened and maybe the the person responsible was still there. So they got in their car and they left. And you might say, well, that's cowardly. But remember, this is in the 90s. There was no cell phones. Most people did not have the fancy car phones. So they went to a neighbor's house and eventually had to stop at a local museum just to call the police to let them know what was going on back at this house.
Yeah, I am 100% on board with their decision to leave. Going into the house could potentially put them in all kinds of danger. So going to find another phone, I do find it odd that the nearest phone was at a museum, but it is what it is. Detectives arrived at the home on the scene of the crime around 11 a.m. and first they found Daniel in the driveway and declared him dead. And then they went into the house. And at this point, you are A, wondering if the assailant is still around, and B, hoping to find some survivors and to find somebody that you can save or somebody that's going to make it out of this situation and hopefully gives you some more information. When they entered the house, they immediately found Karen's body. Her head was still covered in that bloody blanket where the killer had left her laying. Next, they went into the bedroom and discovered the little girls. This scene was so horrific that even years later, seasoned homicide detectives struggled with what they saw and said that this was the most brutal crime scene in their decades-long careers. Some of the detectives on scene actually had to go outside to vomit, and there were some that just couldn't stay there and ended up leaving the homicide unit altogether because they didn't want to see anything like that ever again. One detective asked the lead detective at the scene, well, what do we do now? And he said, I don't know what we do, but we have to find the person that did this.
Police and forensic investigators searched all over this house and the surrounding area, collecting evidence for 7 days. One thing, Jamie, that I found interesting was there was a palm print on one of the walls, and they took pictures of it. They were able to get the prints off, but they were so desperate to maintain evidence and to catch this guy, they actually cut sections of the wall off of the house and took it with them for evidence. Like, they were not going to be satisfied with just a picture. They wanted the physical evidence.
I love it. I mean, if you're going to err in one direction, err on the side of collecting too much.
They also, there was a scene or a spot on a door rather that had a very small fingerprint. It ended up being just the tip print, if that makes any sense, the tip of your finger. So they took the entire door off its hinges and took it back for physical evidence and testing. There was a wave of fear that swept across the state, and people were worried about a random person who was running around with an axe murdering people. And during the search, there was a funeral held for the 4 victims. That was held on March 5th, 1993. It was filled with school children that were friends with Daniel, Amara, and Katrina. Mourning adults were there to pay respects to Karen. This was a very small town, like a close-knit community. Think about if this had happened in Harlan or in Jellicoe. I mean, there's not a funeral home big enough to contain everyone that would come out to support the family.
Absolutely. A huge hit to this community and really decimated this entire family. Meanwhile, police were hard at work investigating and trying to find out what happened here. There was surprisingly little evidence left at the home, but they did find something on the bedroom door. They found a manufactured substance that was later identified as sorbeline cream, which is found in moisturizing lotions. Within that cream was a preserved fingerprint, and they removed the entire door. Like you said, they were not playing around, and they drove it to Perth for further examination. And using a black light, they were able to find a few more prints on the door, and they were on their way to hopefully figuring out who they belonged to.
Because of the remote area, police assumed the assailant was someone who knew the family. So police began questioning everyone who was connected to Karen and her children. They talked to the boyfriend who had recently ended things with Karen. He had a solid alibi, and so he was kind of dismissed as not a likely suspect. They also talked to a man who used to live in the home with the family, and then the father of the little girls. Now, all of them gave their fingerprints and DNA. In total, police talked to over 70 persons of interest, including everyone who was at the party with Karen the night before the murder.
And that's a lot of people to question. In the fact that they're collecting this, remember, this is the early 90s. DNA is just starting to become a buzzword. So who knows what the best practices for collecting that were not in place yet. So certainly something that they were looking into. One of the people they looked into was William Mitchell, who we know gave Karen a ride home from the party the night before. He was a man who also had a rough childhood. He was one of 5 kids in a family who didn't have much money. And at school and in the neighborhood, he was a big target for teasing and hazing and ridicule from other kids. When he was 11 years old, his mother died. And that's when friends say that he started running with the wrong crowd, which is a very common saying, at least where I grew up, of when you're doing things you shouldn't be because of who you're spending your time with. He started using drugs and had very few close friends outside of that drug circle. When Mitchell provided a fingerprint, it came back as a match to the fingerprint on the bedroom door. However, since Mitchell had stayed the previous night, it was completely possible that it was an old print and he left it there when he brought Karen home and had nothing to do with the murder. And we're going to take a break, and we come back. We'll talk about some more strange happenings in this investigation as they try to figure out what went wrong that night in Greenough.
Just when you think this case cannot get any crazier, Jamie, let me throw this at you. So during the investigation, something wild happened. So the host of the party that Mitchell and Karen had attended before her murder reported to the police that his house had been broken into and there was blood on the floor. So police go to this house and they find the keys and wallet of Mitchell. So the next thing you know, they're there at this house investigating why there's blood, why Mitchell's keys are there. Mitchell bursts into the house. He is naked and he has a bloody towel wrapped around his waist. So Mitchell tells police that he is attacked by 3 men who demanded he tell them where the party host was. So they told Mitchell the party host had killed Karen and they wanted to know where he was. Mitchell told the men that he didn't know, so the men attempted to cut off his penis with a knife, hence the bloody towel wrapped around his waist. Mitchell says that he fled and he went outside until he spotted the police cars and then ran back for help.
That's
freaking crazy.
Wild. Think about being on the scene and doing this investigation. You've probably already had to see the crime scene, which was brutal and nauseating for sure. And then this happens. And obviously it's hard not to believe somebody running and panicking with blood all over them. But this is going to take some more digging into. So they took him to the hospital and continued to interview Mitchell. During that questioning, he would admit that he made up the story of the 3 men attacking him.
You telling me the dude faked trying to cut his wiener off?
Yeah, that's I guess if you're going to go for it, you got to commit. He admitted that he had actually tried to kill himself for personal reasons, which obviously your mind goes to guilt, potentially having killed that entire family. So the police charged him immediately with making a false statement about what had happened to him. He had lived in a trailer park, and it seemed that he had performed this self-mutilation in his trailer. Inside, there was blood spatter and semen and a pornographic magazine that had been cut up with a razor blade. This is a scene not only that nobody should ever see, that I feel like I need to go take a shower from talking about. The trailer park owner discovered the scene and called the police immediately, and he suspected that Mitchell might have been connected to the family massacre that had occurred in Greenough. The police came and they took all that in as evidence, but they didn't release any of this information to the media. This was one of those they were keeping tight just in case they needed to confirm something.
So at this point in the investigation, they were re-interviewing and fingerprinting certain persons of interest. When they brought in Mitchell, he said, "I'm surprised you guys are still on this investigation. I thought you guys caught the guy. I heard he was behaving strangely in a caravan park." Caravan is Australian for like trailer.
Yeah.
So the statement sent a chill down the spine of the detective. No one had reported the scene at the trailer park. Mitchell was essentially revealing that he was himself the killer. That's when they arrested the 24-year-old, and detectives showed him the evidence against him, and he coldly confessed.
He walked the detectives through this entire night and this entire attack. He said after he left Karen's house that Sunday after the party, he went back to the party house where he drank some more, smoked some pot, and took some pills, and ultimately injected himself with amphetamines. So he was getting really, really high on a number of substances. Then around 2:30 in the morning, he drove to Greenough in a drug-filled stupor where he ended up killing Daniel, Karen, and her two kids at her home. Detective said he described the entire night in a very callous manner, the way somebody would describe the way that they wash their car, or somebody completing a task that's rudimentary and just going through the steps. Mitchell said after he killed everybody in the house, he went to the bathroom and washed the blood off of his legs and off of the axe. Then he took his axe and the lotion he used to rape Karen with him so he wouldn't leave any evidence behind. On his drive back to Geraldton, he threw the axe into a river and tossed the lotion in a dumpster to try to get rid of him. Inspectors searched the area where Mitchell claimed to have disposed of those things, and even after they found the tomahawk that had been underwater, it still had hair and blood in the head of the axe from the victims.
Isn't that just brutal, dude? Mitchell claimed that because he was so high, he could not recall the details of the night. But many people have pointed out that he was able to drive to and from the house and have the mental clarity to get rid of the evidence. So some people were wondering, was this guy actually high at all? Those people believe he was not high and knew exactly what he was doing. Mitchell ended up pleading guilty to 4 counts of willful murder, 3 counts of indecently interfering with a woman's corpse, and then 1 for sexually assaulting Amaria. During the trial, Mitchell admitted that he had made sexual advances the night that he drove Karen home from the party, but she refused him. His defense attempted to say that Mitchell was a drug addict and not in control of his own actions. The judge rejected any defense of intoxication and drug use, saying that he was clearly able to think and reason during the killings.
Yeah, and that's a big point of contention, whether it's intoxication, which is self-inflicted, or mental health, which is often not, of how aware are you of what you're doing, and B, how much does that actually matter when the actions are this brutal? He would be convicted in 1995, and he was sentenced to 4 concurrent terms of life imprisonment with a non-parole period of 20 years. So essentially, John, for murdering this family of 4, he's getting 20 years in prison before he's allowed to go up for parole. Again, concurrent means that they are running at the same time. So all 4, each year he serves counts for 4 years, which blows my mind that is a thing in the court system. The judge also ruled that the details of the slaying of the kids were too horrendous to be made public, so that they would seal the case files to keep that from getting out, and that I'm very thankful for. The family and the general public were outraged that he would have the possibility of parole at all for a crime so heinous. And the prosecution, which is called the Crown in Australia, appealed to have Mitchell locked away with no chance of parole. It's not often, John, we see the prosecution win the case and then appeal the sentence, and they actually won this. But Mitchell fought that the ruling was unfair, and it was changed back to the 20-year minimum sentence again, where he would still be eligible parole after 20 years.
In 2007, knowing that her daughters and grandchildren's killer would soon be eligible for parole, Barbara issued an appeal for authorities to, quote, throw away the key, end quote. She said that she could live the rest of her life in fear, knowing that there was a chance that this man would be a free man one day. She said, 14 years on and I'm still angry. My life is spent always wondering if he'll be released. We have no proof that he's not going to be let out. For all we know, he could walk out and kill someone else, and I would hate for someone else to have to go through what we have went through. He killed a quarter of my family. That's what he took away, end quote.
In 2010, people were upset to learn that Mitchell had been downgraded to a medium security prisoner and moved to a regional jail. So this is a mass murderer, killed 4 people, and he's now being treated as a middle of the road inmate and sent to this regional prison. People worry that this may have been an indication that he was on his road to parole and that they were preparing him for release back to the community. So the public saw this as a sign that he was going to be getting out.
In 2013, he did become eligible for parole. Before his hearing, there was an online petition opposing his release, and it had over 1,500 signatures. The petition had been organized by a childhood friend of Amaria. The local political figures presented this petition and cited the fact that many of the officers who were on the scene that night never recovered from the scene, and they just told the parole board that this was brutal, that even seasoned detectives could not recover from seeing what they saw. The parole hearing considered Mitchell's case and sent their report to the region's attorney general and left the decision up to him, and he decided not to release Mitchell. Thank God.
Great call. In 2016, he came up for parole again, and this time the same petition had 18,000 signatures, and Karen's sister Evelyn wrote a letter to the parole board. Again, Mitchell was denied being released on parole. The next hearing was set to be in 2019, but in 2018, new laws were introduced saying that mass murderers and serial killers in Australia would be eligible for parole hearings every 6 years instead of every 3. Then, just this month, the Attorney General of Western Australia, John Quigley, announced that 3 murderers, Peter John Maloney, Catherine Margaret Burney, and William Patrick Mitchell, would not be considered for parole for an additional 6 years. This is the statement he put out. There are some crimes so heinous and so disturbing that they have a profound and lasting impact on the entire community. The prospect of a mass murderer or serial killer potentially being granted parole can have a significant impact on secondary victims and the broader community. The suspension of parole consideration for mass murderers and serial killers is primarily intended to address the re-traumatization experienced by the secondary victims of these notorious crimes. Mitchell is currently still in prison, and due to this delay, his next parole possibility will be in the year 2030, which will mean he would have served 37 years at that point.
I hate it that this poor family has to live in the back of their mind that, in their mind, justice is this guy never sees the light of day again. And every 6 years now, there's another delay, but they never will be satisfied. There's always going to be the potential that a board could say, oh, he's rehabilitated. Sorry, I can't say words. And that they will let him out. So I hate that the family has to live their life constantly worrying about, will the person who murdered my family get out? So let me tell you this story, man. In 2010, Karen's sister Evelyn met Mitchell in jail. She wanted the opportunity to tell him face to face about all the pain that he had caused to her and her family. She said that, I wanted to tell him how much I love my sister. She was fighting to build a good life, not only for herself, but for her kids. Evelyn didn't ask him why he did what he did because she wouldn't believe anything he said anyway. So that day she walked into a room and actually thanked him for agreeing to see her. Now, Mitchell immediately said that he was sorry and tried to convince Evelyn that he was a changed man, and he claimed to be a model prisoner. And she said to him, I said, of course you are a model prisoner. You're in protective custody because you don't want the other inmates to find out what you did, but there's no guarantee that what he would do once he was outside. Then Evelyn asked Mitchell if he ever wanted to get out of jail. And Mitchell told her, yeah, that the idea of getting out of jail was, quote, the light at the end of the tunnel. So Evelyn responded to him by saying that she would do whatever it took, quote, with every breath of my body to stop that from ever happening, end quote. Evelyn is a baddie.
And it had to feel good to say that. And, she had to ask him that just to set him up to say that. And I love the fact that she was able to express her pain in this way. I think it was only certain people would be able to do this. I don't know that this is something that I could do to somebody who hurt my family in this way, but Evelyn told him what was what, and she was able to do so. And hopefully he will never see the light of day. This is, of course, the case in Australia that they don't have life without parole as a normal sentence. In Canada, it's the same thing. It's 25 years, and then you're eligible for parole. So in a country where you made a TikTok last week that Kentucky is trying to unban the death penalty, these other countries won't even put people in prison for life. So I think there's some kind of common ground to be found here, and I wish they would find that for Mitchell so that Catherine's family and friends and that community wouldn't have to relive this starting in 2030 every 6 years until Mitchell passes away.
Absolutely.
Guys, we appreciate you hanging out with us through this case. This is, like I said, the Greenough family massacre has been a highly requested episode, and it is brutal and uncomfortable, but certainly a story worth telling and worth learning from. Hopefully the system in Australia can put some laws in place to continue to allow the families to heal without having to go through this kind of trauma.
This is an absolutely brutal one. Jamie, I think you probably had the most brutal section to talk about. I think our writer did you dirty on purpose.
I do think that was intentional.
But you know what, MacKenzie, you're great and happy to have you. Guys, we appreciate you all too. This is a holiday season is upon us. We are looking forward to Christmas, and I'm going to try to end my section with just saying I'm happy for Christmas, and let that be a palate cleanser because I'm done. This is brutal.
This is a brutal case, and we'll be back with another case, maybe not as brutal, tomorrow on True Crime to Go.
Until next crime, this has been True Crimecast.
You've listened to True Crimecast, distributed by Stoveleg Media. Check out stoveleg.com to find out more about your hosts and to find other podcasts to listen to. Stoveleg Media, igniting conversation.